I'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Talent Insights. Talent Insights are Australia's leading specialist data recruitment business. With offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, they're experts at providing recruitment strategy and building data teams for clients across industries Australia-wide. They provide recruitment solutions for all roles across the data lifecycle, including data engineering, data science, advanced analytics, customer and marketing insights, business intelligence, data product managers, and data governance. They're skilled at finding the best permanent and contract hires for your business needs, as well as statement of work, project-focused data resources. At Talent Insights, relationships matter most. I can say from first-hand experience, Talent Insights are fantastic to work with. Whether you're a business leader within an HR network or a specialist data candidate, Talent Insights should be the first company you turn to for all your data recruitment needs. Find them at talentinsights.com.au. Hi, this is Felipe Flores. Welcome to Data Futurology. Today I'm sitting down with a very, very special guest. It's MJ Lowe from Reece. She's the head of data and AI, and I'm really, really excited to spend some time picking your brain. MJ, how are you doing today?
Yeah, good, Felipe. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to maybe kick off by asking you about your role and your remit at the moment. You're in a very exciting organization. It's definitely a big role. So tell us a little bit about that and we can jump from there.
Yeah, sure. So I look after data and AI at Reece. I think quite often folks are maybe surprised that Reece has anything to do with data. We're better known for being a large supplier of plumbing and bathroom supplies. But as we do have really deep and complex business and deep customer relationships. And at the heart of that is what we know about our customers and what we know about how to, serve them and help them, be successful. So the role of data and AI at Reece is really about making that knowledge a tool for our people to use and basically serve our customers better. I look after this. I've been in this role probably 18 months or so fairly new still, and we've been building the team up. We're very lucky to do quite a wide variety of things, and that ranges from core reporting to analytics to building data products and a new enterprise data platform. So there's lots keeping us busy every day. But a lot of this portfolio is really centered on the one proposition, something we're obsessed about, which is how is data going to be used to help improve the life of our customers or our people? And so, that's really at the heart of what we do. And I'm very lucky to be, dealing with all sorts of problems in this space every day.
So it sounds like there's a B2B component to the business. There may be a B2C component, and it sounds like there's some supply chain, some distribution, some retail side. Can you tell us about the size and the components of the business?
Yeah, I'll do my best. Our business is very, very complex. It has such rich history. Sometimes I don't feel like I can do it justice describing it. But we recently celebrated our 100th year anniversary, probably a couple of years ago. And so it's a deep and rich business. Yes, we are a large retailer. We have more than 10 business units across plumbing, HVAC, civil. There's a lot in it. If I had to boil it down, we help our customers who work in trade. And that can range from plumbing businesses to other areas of trade like builders, and that's small to large enterprises. So we have a very deep, set of industries that we service. And with that, I think delivering that proposition of being customized in our solutions and being a partner to our customers in this space means very many different things. It means that our supply chain has to get customers what they need when they need it. It means that our stores, when a customer walks in, probably has to understand what they need before they ask for it. A lot of our plumbing customers, for instance, are incredibly time poor, and our staff in the network who work with these people day in, day out have an extremely deep understanding of not just the business, but the person behind the business. And with that, what it means to help, deliver a solution at that point in time. It could be a broken pipe, a really simple job, or it could be a commercial scale problem about moving a good, or getting certain supplies out to a rural location on a commercial job. And so I guess the range of problems we deal with is as wide, as vast ranging as they come. And with that, delivering personalized service and solutions that truly help our customers also becomes a really complex beast at all parts of the supply chain. And now in a digital world where we also service our customers through digital channels, that has added a dimension of complexity. So it's great, we have a lot of interesting problems, and we've got with that teams that are just curious and very excited to get up and get the job done every day.
I love it. That is great. So much excitement there, so much work and passion. That's fantastic. I wanted to ask you a bit more about your background. So you did a PhD in machine learning and AI with a financial focus. And then how did you find it transitioning from there to industry to then a leader in the space?
Oh gosh, I mean, this cast my mind back quite a number of years now. I mean, I would say my PhD was in the area of financial econometrics. So at the time, I think terms like machine learning and AI weren't commonplace, or at least certainly not within the academic community. A lot of these technologies and mathematical methods, if you may call them, they've been developed over many decades, and so I've always just felt like I was learning, but it was a mixture of time and place and interest, I suppose, that led me from academia to industry and then finding practical problems to solve. The original motivator was really that, when I started in academia and was very fortunate to acquire a tool set in interrogating data, interpreting it, you got the luxury of thinking really deeply about a problem and thinking through its many layers. And that's something that, is hard to find in many places. But it was also around the time when finance and some other industries as well, media and marketing, were leveraging these emerging technologies in the cloud, for instance. So really my interest sort of drew me to how do I apply some of these tools to commercial problems? How do you see the fruits of your labor? And so the opportunities came, I think, first in consulting. I spent some time in EY in the actuarial practice for a while. We're doing a lot of mathematical modeling there. But then a diversity of problems started to grow in industry, and opportunities would find folk like myself who happened to have a skill set, a quantitative skill set, and were interested in solving them. And so as these opportunities came up, I found myself working in media and marketing analytics for a while, and then subsequently for a protracted period in data-related transformations and building solutions that had data and or machine learning in them to drive change in an organization. And so I've been doing that ever since. I think, my interests have grown as the industry has evolved with the technologies, and have been just very fortunate to have opportunities show up that, were interesting enough to, that I could apply myself to and find ways to contribute to.
Amazing to have such a diverse experience and to bring in the transformation components in there as well. I think it definitely are traits for a great leader. So that's fantastic. I wanted to ask you about your passions in this space. So if you think about either our industry or our industry being sort of the data analytics and AI, or your industry specifically, where Reece is, or anything in general, what are your passions in this space?
Oh, look, I think you can look at it a few ways, because I've held a few roles that are all a little bit different, a different flavor in terms of how analytics and data and the more intelligent technologies were applied. But the common thread through them all is the use of data and intelligent tech to make something better, whether that's making something work faster, or whether that's helping a human make a better decision, or whether that's building product with some intelligence in it. It's all in service of driving some kind of change. And so I think I discovered this as my roles evolved, that the thing that would get me up in the morning is how am I going to help drive something different out of, the stuff that we're building today? And that could have been at a point an optimization engine that we might be building that, helps with optimizing workforce distribution. And so the real, I think, interest there is, can we have our workforce working more effectively in the way we're placing people? Can we get them rostered better? That might be, but that's change in that context. Equally, we could be looking at a customer segmentations for the solution, for instance. And the change there is, are we getting smarter about the way we're having conversations with people because we understand them better and we're meeting a need in a more targeted way? And so I think the common thread there, and the thing I've found over time has been the biggest reward is in seeing the work change a behavior or decision for the better. And I think the passion and sustenance in, keeping up with it is seeing something through. What I care a lot about is being able to see something through, because a lot of these things don't happen quickly. Building a model can be quick to prototype, or it can be quick to experiment with. The research process, is one that's quite iterative and fun and quick to start, but really hard to turn into a sustainable solution that you run and operate and continually invest in. And so to realize a lot of the value of the work we do in this space, I think calls for a persistence and a conviction that what you're doing matters and will generate value. And, and that's something that I care a lot about doing. It's hard to do in this industry, but it's one that's always there. And I think if we really believe in the work you're doing in data, that it's a cause worth sticking to.
I love that your immediate focus was on the impact and on the change, and it's it's fantastic to hear that. I think sometimes we get caught up in the problem solving that we can do in isolation. But your focus was from the start immediately on the impact and on the change. What do you think we could do better on that front, on getting more impact from our work?
I think it's a great question, Felipe, and it's I don't know that we have an answer or definitive one, but these are some thoughts, I guess, that I'm discovering along the way. Something that is perhaps challenging or maybe a bit different with data, say, compared to vanilla software engineering, is that the value in a data solution, and that can be something as simple as a report that doesn't have maybe machine learning behind it, or something a bit more complex that does. The value in it is when someone makes a decision and does something differently, hopefully better and faster, right? And whether that's a better targeted customer or a more intelligent recommendation in a product, that's the value is in the decision. That is really hard to get right the first time, because before we have built that solution, we don't know what decisions are going to look like. And the same data in the hands of two different people can lead to different decisions. If we consider, say, the pandemic we've all been living through the past 2-3 years now, the countries had access to the same health data, and each had a very different response. Now, without casting any judgment at all as to which is right or wrong or which is better, I think it's just to show the point that you can have the same information but still have very different outcomes with that. So then I guess proving out value, given that sort of uncertainty over the life cycle of data, is a tricky one. It's not a linear path. And so I think something that helped, certainly teams I've worked in, is to take a fail fast sort of approach to measuring value, proving out value, and constantly checking and adapting if we need to. And it's a combination of working backwards from an end state, but also having the discipline to periodically check if it is delivering value. Quite often, we get asked questions like, can we build a smart AI thing into one of our digital products? And the answer actually is maybe we need to ask that question a bit differently, which is, if we were to build a very smart thing into our digital products, what does that do for our customer? Is that going to change is that going to make something better? Are they going to find what they need faster? Or are they going to get a delivery out to where they are faster? Whatever that might be, let's work backwards from what a great outcome we think might look like. Let's make a plan for that. But let's also be prepared along the way to be surprised that what we thought would work wouldn't work. We're working on a recommender service at the moment in our team. Without giving too much away, we went in with a few hypotheses about how customers might respond to that and how it might actually uplift, their ability to find the product or to locate one that suited their needs. And not all experiments have come back with what we thought they would. Certain features in the way we designed it, we thought would go great, and there was just no product market fit on that. And so there is an element of working backwards, but there is also a discipline of, as you move forward, adapting through it. And that, I think, ability to do that and the discipline to accept that a failed experiment is as valuable, if not more valuable, than a winning experiment, I think is something that we've certainly found beneficial here at Reece, and I've certainly found beneficial in the teams I've worked with previously. And if anyone else can benefit from that, I'd love to hear. I'd love to see that more in our industry.
Definitely, I love that approach. Start with a problem, a business problem, or something that we want to improve, something that we know that our customers care about, and work backwards to see if AI is needed. And if so, what it would do. That's great. And then doing different hypothesis testing to see what customers really want. Because sometimes what people say and what they want is slightly different. And this is the only way to find it. So I really like that approach. So I wanted to maybe take a step back as an industry, and or look at a whole of industry. And I wanted to ask you about how we are going on diversity and on inclusion. I know that these are areas that we've you and I have spoken about before. We're passionate about this space, and I always really value your perspectives on this. So I'm keen for us to spend a little bit of time diving into that. Sure. How do you think we're going?
Oh, that's a huge question, Felipe. I like your style. Look, I think there's never been a time, certainly in my professional life anyway, that it's been spoken about with the attention and the care, I think, that the industry has paid to the topic. I think I cast my mind back 10, 20 years when I was earlier on in my career, and this wasn't a topic. It was implicit. I think people had views and opinions, but it wasn't something you'd speak freely about. And now it is something that organizations and individuals alike are paying attention to. How do we improve diversity in workforces? Implicit in a lot of what's discussed, I think, is the idea that, more diverse workforces, and particularly in data and technology, leads to better outcomes for the customer, better outcomes for business. That's the underlying assumption. And I think hats off to the industry for, recognizing that and drawing awareness to it, and, creating momentum behind the discussions. I do think the work is never finished. And in some ways, we are at a point in time currently where we talk about it, and we actively see initiatives in organizations to improve things like gender mix or ethnic mix in their teams, so to speak. But for me, I think diversity is a bit broader than that. Diversity can be on any element really that makes us similar or different. And the common ones are those that I've just mentioned, but it goes beyond that. So how do we go past talking about certain heuristics, I think, and just look for the qualities that make for a diverse workforce? So that we focused a lot on that, I think, in the teams that I've been in, where, yes, we recognize that we get behind movements and we get behind initiatives that are quite focused on certain kinds of diversity. We've just celebrated Idle Hobbit Day. Here at Reece, was a wonderful day for the community to get together.
Very nice.
Months ago, we were involved in International Women's Day as well. I think you and I had a conversation around that time too.
Yes.
But how do we make those sorts of initiatives and events just what we do? How do we find diverse workforces by way of thinking, by way of preferences, attitudes, but with shared values? And I think in that respect, we have some work to do. I'm very fortunate at Reece that we talk quite openly about the fact that we may not be as balanced across certain dimensions as we want to be, but we are working at it. And being able to talk freely about that and empower a workforce to recognize the problems we want to work on is, I think, really powerful. And so while I might not be in the majority of certain groups here, I've never once felt excluded, and that to me is at the heart of diversity and inclusion, where, it's not a thing. You wake up and you are just one of a team doing great work together. So I think, we've got some work to do there, where I think we've progressed into being able as a community and as an industry to talk about these topics and to actively raise awareness and drive change in certain areas. I'd love to see us be able to move past that and not have to rely on as heavily on, loud messages, I suppose, where diverse workforces are just part of what we do.
Yeah, that is great. So, so it sounds like, and tell me where, or expand on this, or tell me where I'm paraphrasing incorrectly. But it sounds like for inclusion, a good summary is around how people feel in the groups that they work in, and whether they feel like they can speak up or contribute, or whether they're comfortable in doing that. And then on diversity, I like your perspective of going beyond diversity or demographical diversity and expanding to intellectual diversity, so diversity of thought, diversity of attitude, and that having the values, I guess, the professional values and the personal values of people as the bit that ties it together. Is that how you see both sides of in terms of inclusion and diversity?
Yeah, Felipe, this is a great summary of the thinking. Inclusion is really about being included, and that you have a right to be there just like everybody else, regardless of how you look or sound or are different from someone else, that it does not impinge on your right to be in a place adding value. But the diversity element, I think, describes differences that are productive. And diversity of thought certainly goes beyond ethnic or demographic differences. It could simply be professional backgrounds, for example. You could have someone who is looking to move into product management and didn't have the opportunity before, but brings great skills that would really lift our product management capability, for example. How do we create opportunities for that? How do we create pathways for that? If you were building a team, for example. So I think it goes beyond what's seen and a lot more into the intangible when we think about diversity here at Reece and certainly in my team.
Yeah, that's great. And could you share with us some of the blind spots that you may have noticed that people have when it comes to diversity and inclusion? I know that, and I know that often people do that with good intentions, and I know that for myself in my career, like I've made blunders in this space where I've had like nothing but the best intent, but have really like stuck my foot in it. And luckily, like I was able to have follow-up conversations to help me remove some of those blind spots. And sometimes, at least for me, it was like I was looking for optimization and time efficiency on something that I could have collaborated better, where I could have consulted more broadly, and that if I took literally like a tiny amount of more time up front, the end result would have been so much better. And I didn't see that as a blind spot in diversity and inclusion. So I always value removing some of those blind spots for people. So if you could you share some of the blind spots that you've seen from your career?
Oh gosh, I think with Felipe, you might be hard on yourself. I think we've all found ourselves in, some of those situations where you've said something that certainly wasn't intended to come off a certain way, but might have, and then you kind of question it post hoc, or, people have, I think we've all been there. I wouldn't say I'm qualified in this space, because I think what one is blind to or not is relative.
Mm-hmm.
What is, what hurts is relative. What someone takes with them or how someone receives something is relative to, and seen through the lens of their own experience. So I don't know that we can classify things or call out really, like, it's not I wouldn't take a rules-based approach to it, no less. But I think, a lot of what colors, our lenses or colors or the biases that we may sort of bring into a situation really is a function of the environments we grew up in. And so I'm from Singapore. I grew up in Singapore and came to Australia almost 20 years ago. I grew up in a society where we had very many ethnic groups in school, really just in the community. We had all sorts of people from various different backgrounds. It was a very multiracial society. And people spoke, about each other's backgrounds like it was a common thing. There were jokes, kids used to joke about things, used to make references to someone else's ethnic background. And that was this societal norm there. A blind spot for me when I migrated in my adult life was learning societal norms that were different to that. Mm-hmm. And having to develop an empathy for what is and isn't okay to say, because while I may not have intended it that way, it certainly comes off differently, in this new society. And so I think that, would have been a blind spot related to where I come from. And I think, that might play out differently for folks who, have also, migrated between countries and moved between different cultures. So certainly cultural nuances is probably an area that, I've learned over time, and being very lucky to be in Melbourne. It is a melting pot of cultures here, and I love it here. And I think we are the better for it, developing that empathy. So that's probably one area. I think another area too is on issues of, age, or within certain industries, gender, those things come up too. There are stereotypes and blind spots that relate to a stereotype within a certain area. At Reece, we are a trade business. We are proudly a trade business. It is loud. It is characterized by certain heuristics, and one has to be careful not to assume a whole bunch of other things that come with it. So, these are other areas that, again, are against the backdrop of the environment one is in. And so this, second example is more work setting and the industry that, I belong to. But again, in working with tradespeople, we have to be thoughtful about what is meaningful to them, and how to make things simple and meaningful within this space where it might not be in another, in the way we communicate and engage with our customers and our colleagues. So there's quite a few, I guess, different ways to cut it, but I think it comes down to the context of the environment. And what has always been helpful, I think, is being open and trying to always be quite empathetic, and open to the idea that there are new people who would be different in a different way to learn about, and so that's been a continuous learning journey, and continues to be.
Yeah, that is great. I love your approach of being open-minded, assuming the best, and looking for ways to connect and collaborate, and to help and encourage people to contribute, and making sure obviously that you do that for yourself too in that journey. That's a really fantastic approach.
Thank you. I think it's been very lucky to have worked in many teams with that themselves have been very diverse and different. So, been very lucky to have had people invest in this journey to learn from. And so that's a thing that I think we're very lucky here in Australia, and certainly working in tech and data, where the community always has something to offer, not always in the technical sense too, how you relate with one another. It's a very diverse, a very rich community to be a part of. So yeah, we're very fortunate.
I love it. So just to switch gears a little bit, I wanted to ask you about some of your frustrations. So frustrations that you have in say in our industry, in anywhere, but it can be how the work gets done, or on the technology, or how it's operationalized, or how we're perceived by executives, or how any sort of frustrations that might grind you of how we in our industry.
Oh gosh, look, it's a challenging industry to be in, data and technology. I wouldn't call these frustrations, in a real negative sense. There are real challenges, and as every industry does. But I think a couple of things are unique to data and AI in particular. One sort of ties in with what I was earlier mentioning about seeing things through. Value of data is not easily seen. Data is hard, it's complex, it's expensive. It's expensive because a decision maker is usually very far away from how something is built. The chief customer officer, for example, almost will never make a decision about whether to build an app with a free text field to collect customer feedback, or with a drop-down list. But the chief customer officer will care if it was built in a free text field that they later need a machine learning team to decipher through all the data that comes back to get an understanding of customer sentiment, right? So small decisions can become really consequential later on. So it is expensive, it is complex, and hard to then prove the value on, because usually in the time periods between now and later are long, and you don't always live to see the end result of a choice made, much earlier. So it can be challenging, because it makes things like what to invest in really hard. Do we choose the short-term POC over adding to the kitty for a long-term machine learning investment? What do we choose? The short-term thing is always going to feel more appealing, but we know it almost always brings tech debt with it. And so that is, I think, something that's always been difficult working in data and data-related transformations. That choice, that those really hard choices around investments and the uncertainty around what's going to pay off, that probably is an area of difficulty we continue to work through as an industry. And I think related to that is that accountability over those horizons is also really hard to measure. The people who started a transformation normally don't stick around long enough to see the end result, and new people get on the bus or come on the journey, and decisions change. So the short-term horizon of a lot of investments leads to probably much longer journeys than organizations might want to be on when it comes to data and transformations. So, these are very real challenges and can be frustrating, I suppose. You're in one of those conversations trying to make an investment case for something is right, but is hard to get behind right now. But that's also what makes this work very rewarding too, because when you can see it through and when you can find ways to prove out value in it and find that balance between a short-term value drop and a longer-term commitment, there's no feeling like it. I think, we just in the last month wrapped up a project here. I can't talk too much about it other than it was about an 8-month-long project working with data for, to help tailor some of the conversations that we're having with our customers. And it's a project that's been a long time coming. There's been many goes at it, many failures, because we couldn't get the data into the state that it needed to be. And we had to really rethink the program of work, how to restructure that into a series of experiments, but also delivery disciplines around it to actually move through the milestones. And I think the day we put the tool built into the hands of some of our frontline staff who said, I'm going to go sell a product with this, there's no feeling like that. So it can be done, but it is a journey and a hard march at times. But with that comes great reward.
That's amazing. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. That is very, very inspiring.
Yeah.
Thank you. I also noticed in our conversation that we often mention data and technology together, and sometimes we mention them separately. I know that sometimes data teams sit within the technology space. Sometimes they don't. How do you see them? Where do you see that they're similar and different? And what's the perspective that you take between the two?
Oh, that's such a great question, and such a big one to believe. And I think the truth is it depends. You kind of ask different people this, and you see that in different organizations as well. To me, I think data and technology are very related areas of work, but have some distinctions. You can't serve up scaled solutions without technology, certainly not scaled data solutions. What I mean is without technology. We have the luxury of cloud technologies, distributed compute, and so they are complementarian in that respect. And the technical aspects of architecting a system really to bring with an effective technical architecture for delivering data, requires both deep software engineering skills, for example, as well as a deep understanding of information, how you manage it through its life cycle, which in and of itself, it's its own discipline. So there are some areas where I guess data as a field that involves the management and use of information is very tightly coupled with technology fields like software engineering or infrastructure. They're very, very tightly coupled in that regard. Where I think data as an area is not the same as technology, if technology were to be described in software and infrastructure, is where you can focus a lot building software that performs tasks or enables humans to perform tasks. And the value of that software is when those tasks are optimized. So for example, an ERP system. We have custom ERP system here at Reece. We've got a brilliant team that looks after it. Everything that is in our ERP is optimized for the tasks our people need to perform to facilitate transactions. Those are known tasks. Those are very thoughtfully crafted over years, but those are known tasks. Where data is different is that the value of a data-intensive solution, yes, that is built on top of technology, the value of that solution, though, is in the insight. And so where you might be able to call a piece of software done and doing well when its known tasks are performed well, you call a data solution a good one or a high-value one when insight has been extracted and applied to a decision. And those are far less predictable to do than tasks. And user feedback on insight is far less reliable than user feedback on software tasks. If a user tells us, I don't like this front-end interface because I hate the purple color in that button, they are likely to stick to that over time. But in data, when you're building a solution for a user, they might early on say, I want to be able to look at these metrics and drill into them. And once you've built it, change their mind because they've realized in use that's not exactly how they would apply themselves to it. So I would say the difference here then with data is that it's got a second layer of complexity on top of task-oriented technologies and therefore facilitating programs of work that involve delivering value through data requires some extra thought, in putting together how do you staff that, what the kind of expertise is for delivering that, the change and enablement aspects of that, and the lifecycle management of those programs. That all just plays out a bit differently when there's a lot of data in the mix. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting question though. And, I think as technologies evolve in this space, so will, the parts that converge and diverge between the two.
Yeah, but I really like that perspective of looking at the task and the decisions, and it's so true that in the analytics space, the people will change their mind often as they see the work coming through. So it often feels like a very expensive and exploratory space, and then hopefully we're getting to a point where we say, great, now this is something that needs to be done at scale, or then it needs to be move more into a tech space once the exploration component has taken part. So that's really nice.
I think that's a really nice way of summing it up, Felipe. I think you make a really great point too, in that there is two speeds, and it's not to say that cycle of changing your mind, so to speak, is a bad thing. That's part of the learning process, and getting to a successful outcome requires a learning process in many instances. So I think the art is in at what point have we learned enough that's of value to productionize. And, I think someone once said, don't go for perfection, go for good enough and add to that, And so I think the journey with data is very much that way, in that allowing for some degree of iteration, but wrapping around it the discipline to go, that's got enough value, let's make it available to people, and then let's go on that journey all over again, is something that's, a really great way to be able to work in data, realize value in a really, I guess, a telic way. The job's never quite done, and that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Since you've worked in transformations, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you see the differences when it comes to cloud migrations. There is a big transformation that a lot of organizations are doing or starting. And how do you see the differences between a system like an ERP that you mentioned and a data system like a data warehouse? What do you see the commonalities and the differences when we look at a transformation and particularly a cloud migration?
Oh, I mean, that's a really you got my work cut out for me today, haven't you? It's look, the similarity and differences, it's what you make of it. The transformation, again, it's such a broad term, but usually what organizations are looking for is that the way things work and the way teams work and communicate is different enough that it generates more value than previously, right? So if we were to anchor on that as a definition for transformation, then, the role of cloud versus the role of things like migrations perhaps is about where they fit in that system. And so if we were to say, we're looking at an organization like Reece, and in many respects, part of our DNA has always been transformation. We didn't wake up one day and say, we're going to transform and here we go. It's in the organizational DNA to improve the lives of our people and customers every day. That's something that's been loud and proud here at Reece every day. So for us, transformation is almost just part of how we plan to do things. People expect process improvements. People expect tech improvements. We've got continuous improvements teams. We've got continuous uplift rhythms. And we've got the bigger projects like migrations that form a part of that overarching, change. And then we've got, programs of work that have the word transformation attached to it, but more to do with the horizon and the size of it. But the intent is much the same. And so some of our cloud work would probably fall into that big transformation agenda, if we would describe it that way. But its nature, which is to enable teams to be able to do things better, faster, at greater scale for our customers, is of the same intent as, a database migration. We would be performing migrations in the same spirit, but probably actually executing on that to a different rhythm, so to speak. So certainly in our context, the two have similar intent and just look very different in its execution. I think casting my mind back though to kind of other organizations, when I was a consultant kind of working with very many different Australian organizations, some of these were very project specific, and that's where you might see very real differences. So there would be programs of work that I'd be engaged in that was very, very targeted at a problem. It could have been a banking problem, for example, where we are looking to really modernize a system, and that was transformation from a modernization perspective, where cloud in that setting had a very different flavor to simply migrating a database or doing an ERP system migration. Equally, we could have been doing a piece of cloud work at a different retailer from a marketing perspective. And again, that cloud work might not really have been a transformation, but more like a project where we were uplifting a particular capability to add value to existing processes. So I do think the similarity and differences between cloud programs, or if you like, versus some of the more commonly heard of perhaps pieces like migrations, does come down to the organizational strategy and what these programs of work actually serve in that strategy. Yeah.
No, that makes complete sense. Thank you.
So what's your thoughts, okay?
Sorry?
What are your thoughts from your travels as well? Because you've worked in this space a great deal too, so I'm always curious. It feels like an ever evolving comparison.
It is, isn't it? And it's so a lot of times in my career, I've been in organizations who that are looking to move to the cloud, and sometimes they have their sometimes rightly or wrongly, and sometimes they have their strategy defined as we will move to the cloud, which like doesn't, as we spoke before, like it doesn't focus on the business problem or on the customer and what they want to do. And in those cases, it does feel quite rudderless in terms of the work. And sometimes they can be quite big pieces of work. And in those cases, my preference is to do a cloud adoption, basically one use case at a time. So very, very small, and set up some infrastructure, ideally sort of end to end, something very light, and take on just one use case at a time, and start putting kind of like one brick at a time. If people are not confident, or it's not a clear strategy, or if it's start of a process, like that's definitely at least what I've seen, a good approach. But when you do have a clear point that a clear pain point that you want to solve, a clear customer value, and you have some good planning and some experience on what the cloud can do for you, then you can take much more ambitious bets, and they're usually ones that take longer to build, for you to make a big transformation in a space. And like those pay off when they're done well. But I think that's one of the, at least from what I've seen, that's one of the big differences, that sometimes it can feel like people, this is kind of like, I don't know if it's too cynical or if it sounds too terrible, but sometimes it feels like it's going through the motions, in terms of we're going to start using cloud, and then cloud will fix everything, and we'll figure out what to do exactly with it down the road. So if that's the case, make it small and incremental. But if we're putting a stake on the ground on something that we want to focus on, and we want to build to it, and we know the benefits the clear benefits that we're chasing, then I'm all for bigger programs of work and a bigger and a more ambitious transformation, because the clarity of the outcome is there, and we can measure progress towards that in a way that delivers value. So
yeah, that's a great point. And like, yeah, I agree. It feels like when you've got a larger program of work, it's really a huge task in uncertainty reduction around what value there actually is in that work. How are we tracking it, and how do we know we are staying the course on that? And so, yeah, that's certainly what we've seen here as well. With some of the larger programs of work, it just requires a different set of execution disciplines to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that those investments are, reaping benefits and at a rate that is practical too. So, yeah, it's a really interesting space, definitely.
I have to say, I know we're almost out of time. I might, I have to say, I really, really enjoy picking your brain, speaking with you. I think that you're such a fantastic leader. I really, I love that the fact that you're such a deep thinker. You're so thoughtful about the key issues in our industry and how we execute our work. And you have such unique perspectives to what we do, and I learn a lot from every time we speak. So thank you so much for taking the time today to share your perspectives with us. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you for having me, Felipe. And similar thoughts, similar sentiments too. I always enjoy our thoughts, and looking forward to sharing many more stories and swapping many more experiences. Thanks for having me.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope that you got a lot out of this discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel so more people can find out about the challenges that leaders have in the analytics and AI space. And that's what we're trying to share in Data Futurology. So please like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Thank you so much.